was a freak of nature, a monster with NCAA gold, WWE belts, and a UFC title, all before most fighters even peak. Brock Lesnar didn't just dominate one sport, he conquered three. With traps like boulders and fists like hammers, he wasn't just built different, he was different. But for all the glory, Lesnar never wanted the spotlight. He hated fame, loathed the circus, and vanished more than once at the height of his powers. Who walks away from WrestleMania? From the UFC Heavyweight Championship? From everything. Behind the beast was a man running from something, maybe the lights, maybe himself. This is the story of a farm boy who became a legend, then disappeared into the woods. A fighter who refused to be famous. A myth who never wanted to be remembered. This is Brock Lesnar, the most dominant athlete combat sports ever saw, and the most unknowable. Before the monster, before the myth, before the millions, there was just a boy named Brock, born in the icy quiet of Webster, South Dakota. Population, less than 2,000. A town of long winters, short summers, and nothing but farmland as far as the eye could see. Most kids there learned how to drive tractors before they learned how to fight. But Brock Lesnar was not most kids. He was born on July 12, 1977, the third of four brothers, in a family that worked the land with their bare hands. His parents were dairy farmers, hard, humble people who didn't believe in shortcuts. Days started before sunrise, and work didn't stop when the sun went down. Shoveling grain, hauling hay, wrestling calves twice his size. That's how Brock built his power, not in gyms, but in barns. His strength wasn't sculpted, it was forged. And even back then, people noticed something was off, or more accurately, something was different. He was massive, even as a kid. Thick neck, barrel chest, hands like cinder blocks. But he wasn't just big, he was fast. Dangerous combination. Coaches had no idea what to do with him. Bullies quickly learned not to try. By middle school, Brock was already terrifying. But physically gifted kids from small towns? They're not rare. What made Brock Lesnar unnatural was what went on behind those cold, silent eyes. He didn't want to play. He wanted to win. He didn't compete for friends or trophies. He competed to dominate. Losing wasn't an option. It wasn't in his wiring. When he lost, which was rare, he wouldn't talk for days. He'd stew, train harder, come back meaner. Still, in towns like Webster, dreams have a ceiling. No one expected Lesnar to go far. He was too isolated, too rural, too removed. But under the fluorescent lights of high school wrestling mats, Brock began carving a name, not just because he won, but because of how he won. Fast pins, sudden lifts, broken opponents. His matches looked like mismatches. By the time he graduated, he wasn't just a local phenomenon. He was being whispered about in national wrestling circles, a recruiter's dream with freak genetics, raw power, and a streak of savagery. But still, few believed he'd rise to true greatness. He wasn't polished. He wasn't media-trained. He was just a farm boy with fists. And that's what they misunderstood. Because Lesnar didn't need polish. He didn't want it. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing something else entirely. Proof that a kid from the coldest fields of nowhere could walk into any room and make giants afraid. And that hunger? That would take him far beyond South Dakota. By the time Brock Lesnar stepped onto a collegiate wrestling mat, the myth had already started to grow. He began his college career at Bismarck State in North Dakota, a junior college with a small program. But he wasn't there for long. His first season was a massacre, undefeated, unchallenged. The NCAA National Championship claimed with ease. He was tossing opponents like crash test dummies. There wasn't a single wrestler at that level who could survive 3 minutes with him. The University of Minnesota saw the storm coming and recruited fast. Bigger school, bigger platform, bigger names. But Lesnar didn't flinch. He transferred in 1999 and instantly became the most feared heavyweight in the country. He wasn't just winning matches, he was ending them. Pin after pin, slam after slam. It was almost surgical, except it looked like carnage. Lesnar's style was raw brutality sharpened with surprising technique. He'd use his weight to smother you, then explode with torque that made other heavyweights panic. Most wrestlers gasped for breath. Lesnar, he barely broke a sweat. His 2000 NCAA record, 33 wins, 1 loss. And that 1 loss? He avenged it in the final, under the lights. Brock Lesnar became NCAA Heavyweight Champion. The image is still iconic. Lesnar, arms raised, mouth open in a primal scream, soaked in sweat, crowned the most dominant amateur wrestler in America. But what's more important than the title is the fear. Coaches said it, referees saw it, wrestlers felt it. Brock Lesnar was a walking intimidation machine. Not because he talked trash, he barely said anything, but when he stepped onto the mat, the mood changed. You weren't wrestling an athlete. You were trying to survive a force of nature. And here's where the story bends. Most NCAA champions follow a path: coaching, Olympic dreams, training younger wrestlers. But Lesnar, he didn't want a medal. He wanted money. He wanted violence. He wanted a bigger stage. And while other champions debated joining the Olympic team, Lesnar had already set his eyes elsewhere, on a world where performance, power, and pain were currency: professional wrestling. But make no mistake, Lesnar wasn't running to WWE. He was running through it. As far as he was concerned, it was just another battlefield. And for the next 3 years, he would change it forever. WWE in 2002 was packed with legends: The Rock, Stone Cold, The Undertaker, Kurt Angle, men who had defined an era. But when Brock Lesnar debuted on March 18th of that year, something shifted. He didn't walk down the ramp. He stormed it. No pyros, no speeches, just violence. He attacked everyone in sight like a predator entering a cage full of meat. And from that moment, the company knew they had something different. Dubbed the next big thing, Lesnar wasn't just another muscle-bound rookie. He was an anomaly. At 6 feet 3 inches, 290 pounds, with speed that defied physics, he moved like a middleweight in a heavyweight's body. And his look? Terrifying. No gimmick, no comedy, just fury. His F5 finishing move became an instant highlight. One spin, one slam, and it was over. Within 6 months, Lesnar was facing off with The Rock at SummerSlam and beat him clean. At 25, he became the youngest WWE champion in history. Fans didn't cheer, they stared. He wasn't beloved, he was respected. In that ring, he wasn't a performer, he was a weapon. But what made Lesnar's rise so jarring wasn't just the speed, it was the legitimacy. WWE has always been scripted, yes, but Lesnar blurred the lines. His matches felt real. He didn't sell pain like others, he inflicted it. Opponents had to brace for his suplexes like they were actual combat. Behind the scenes, many feared him, because if Lesnar didn't like you, he could hurt you, for real. And there was nothing you could do about it. He was unstoppable. Until he wasn't. Because while Brock Lesnar was conquering WWE, a storm was building inside him. The fame? He hated it. The travel? Miserable. The fans? Too close. He was making millions, but it didn't matter. He didn't care about merchandise or autographs or promos. He just wanted to fight, to dominate, to leave. And WWE wouldn't allow that. Too many appearances, too many obligations, too much talking. So in 2004, at the height of his fame, Brock Lesnar did the unthinkable. He quit. He walked out of the biggest wrestling company on earth. Mid-contract, mid-fame, mid-mania, because for Brock, being the next big thing was never the goal. He didn't want to be a star. He wanted to be free. And the next time we'd see him would be in an arena with real consequences. When Brock Lesnar walked away from WWE in 2004, fans were stunned. No warning, no farewell, no final match, just gone. At 26, he was at the top of the wrestling world, and he simply vanished. What could possibly make someone trade in global fame and millions of dollars for uncertainty? Answer: Brock never wanted the show. He wanted the fight. And in his eyes, there was still one battlefield left unconquered: the NFL. The world laughed. Sports commentators mocked the idea. Lesnar hadn't played football since high school. No college stats, no draft history. And yet, he declared his intent to join the Minnesota Vikings, not as a PR stunt, but to make the team. While most athletes train their whole lives for the NFL, Brock gave himself a few months and still nearly pulled it off. But the road wasn't smooth. Before training camp even started, Lesnar crashed his motorcycle, broke his jaw, bruised his pelvis, tore muscles in his groin and left hand. He recovered quickly, because of course he did, and still showed up at Vikings camp, battered but determined. And despite the pain, despite the odds, he made it to the final roster cuts. He even played in multiple preseason games. For a man with zero college football experience, that was unheard of, but it wasn't enough. He didn't make the team. The Vikings offered him a chance to join NFL Europe to develop, but he declined. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity, because by now, Brock Lesnar had figured out something critical about himself. He didn't care about being famous. He didn't even care about being accepted. He cared about proving that his body could go anywhere, do anything, dominate anyone. WWE? Done. NCAA? Dominated. NFL? Almost. But now, he was looking for something real, something raw, something that couldn't be dismissed as scripted or fake. And there was only one place left to find it: the cage. The world of MMA, where the pain was real, where the wins were absolute, where no one, not even Brock Lesnar, could fake their way to the top. Brock Lesnar had every reason to skip MMA. He was already rich, already famous, already feared, but none of that mattered, not to him. He wanted to prove that his strength wasn't just for show, that his dominance wasn't theatrical. He wanted to walk into a locked cage with another killer and come out victorious. So in 2007, at 30 years old, Brock made his MMA debut. It wasn't in some local underground promotion. It wasn't slow. It wasn't cautious. It was violent. His first fight was against a 2-5 fighter named Min-Soo Kim, a mismatch on paper, but a necessary launch. Lesnar bulldozed him in 69 seconds. Takedown, ground and pound, done. The MMA world noticed this wasn't just a publicity stunt. Brock Lesnar wasn't playing. The UFC signed him immediately. His first fight, Frank Mir, a former UFC champion and one of the sport's best grapplers. The matchmaking was cruel. Lesnar looked like a gladiator. But MMA is more than power. In the opening seconds, he ragdolled Mir, took him down, hammered his face. But one mistake, one slip, and Mir caught a knee bar. Submission. Lesnar's first loss. Humbling, brutal, real. But Brock didn't quit. He came back against Heath Herring, a veteran with over 40 fights. Lesnar dominated, sent Herring flipping across the cage with a punch, controlled every round, wrestled like a gorilla, moved like a lion. Decision, win. Then came Randy Couture, the legend, the 5-time champion. Lesnar was only 2-1 in MMA and already fighting for the UFC Heavyweight title. Everyone expected Couture to school him. Instead, Lesnar broke him, wobbled him with a short right, finished him in the second. Brock Lesnar, just 4 fights into his MMA career, was the UFC champion, and it didn't stop there. He avenged his loss to Frank Mir at UFC 100, the most-watched event in UFC history. Lesnar smashed him, mounted him, humiliated him, screamed in his face as the ref pulled him off. It wasn't just a win, it was a message. This isn't wrestling. This isn't fake. I'm here, and I'm real. In just over a year, Lesnar went from MMA rookie to the most terrifying heavyweight on earth. Pay-per-view numbers exploded. Mainstream coverage followed. He became the biggest draw in UFC history. But while the outside world saw dominance, inside Lesnar's body, something sinister was beginning to grow. It started as stomach pain. Nothing unusual. Brock Lesnar had trained through worse, but soon it became something else. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. The pain twisted his gut like barbed wire. He dropped weight, lost strength, and still, he fought through it. Most people didn't know it yet, but during his reign as UFC champion, Brock Lesnar was dying from the inside. The diagnosis? Diverticulitis, a brutal intestinal disease that can rupture the colon, poison the bloodstream, and kill if untreated. Doctors said he was lucky to be alive. Lesnar refused surgery. He drained the infected area manually. He fought through the pain. Why? Because he didn't want excuses. He still defended his title. He still trained. He still fought Shane Carwin, an undefeated wrecking ball with dynamite fists. In round 1, Lesnar was obliterated, taken down, pummeled, nearly finished. But in round 2, he recovered, took Carwin down, choked him out. It was one of the gutsiest wins in UFC history, and yet the damage was permanent. In 2010, he faced Cain Velasquez, a younger, faster, sharper machine. Lesnar came in lighter, slower, depleted, and Cain tore through him, knocked him out, took the title. Lesnar took time off, had surgery, tried to recover, but his body was done playing catch-up. The disease had ravaged his strength. The pain returned. His final UFC fight was against Alistair Overeem, a Dutch striker with vicious knees and lethal kicks. Lesnar couldn't keep up. Overeem crushed him with a body shot. Lesnar folded. After just 8 fights, Lesnar's MMA career was over. The beast had been broken. Not by an opponent, not by fear, but by his own body. And for the second time in his life, he stepped away from a kingdom in silence. When Brock Lesnar retired from MMA in 2011, the fighting world assumed it was over. The beast had been broken. The body was failing. The warpath had ended. But Brock Lesnar doesn't follow assumptions. In 2012, just a year after getting battered by Alistair Overeem, Lesnar returned, not to the octagon, but to the ring, WWE, the place he once walked away from. But this time, he came back different, bigger, meaner, colder. He wasn't trying to be a hero or a heel. or a character. He was a hitman. His return promo didn't promise entertainment, it promised violence. Lesnar became a part-time enigma. He wouldn't show up weekly. He didn't need to. When he did appear, it was to destroy, period. His first target? John Cena, the company's golden boy. At Extreme Rules 2012, Lesnar mauled him. Elbows, knees, blood. It felt less like a match and more like a televised mugging. And that was just the beginning. Lesnar's second WWE run was a masterclass in selective brutality. He became known for Suplex City, tossing grown men like rag dolls. He broke Triple H's arm, slammed Big Show through broken chairs, and in 2014, he did the unthinkable. He ended The Undertaker's undefeated streak at WrestleMania. The crowd fell silent, not shocked, confused. Lesnar didn't celebrate. He didn't cut a promo. He just stared, like it was inevitable. Because to him, it was. That same year, he obliterated John Cena at SummerSlam. 16 German suplexes in one match. Cena barely landed a shot. Fans were stunned. This wasn't just dominance, it was humiliation, a statement. The era of superstars was over. This was the era of the mercenary. Brock Lesnar didn't play the game. He was the game. WWE knew it. The fans knew it. Opponents felt it. His matches became events, and his presence, priceless. He showed up on his own schedule, said almost nothing, fought like a storm, left without a scratch. But Lesnar wasn't done with MMA. In 2016, 5 years after his last UFC fight, he announced a shocking return. UFC 200. Against knockout artist Mark Hunt, people were skeptical. Lesnar had lost 2 straight. His body had been through surgery, disease, wear and tear. He won, dominated with wrestling, controlled the entire fight. A clean, tactical victory. Or so it seemed. Days later, the result was overturned. Lesnar had tested positive for banned substances. The win was scrubbed, his record adjusted. Critics screamed fraud. The MMA world called him a joke. But here's the twist. Lesnar never cared. He didn't chase approval, or rankings, or respect. He made $2.5 million for 15 minutes of work. No apology, no regrets. Because that's the truth about Brock Lesnar. He's not a competitor. He's a contract killer. And once the job is done, he disappears. Try to define Brock Lesnar, and the answers will contradict each other. To wrestling fans, he's a part-time destroyer, the guy who ended the streak, the final boss of WWE. To MMA purists, he's either an overrated freak show or the most underappreciated champion in UFC history. To casuals, he's that scary dude with the sword tattoo. But ask Brock Lesnar who he is? You won't get an answer. Because Lesnar doesn't explain. He doesn't tweet. He doesn't podcast. He doesn't coach. He doesn't sit on panels breaking down his fights. He doesn't even watch wrestling or MMA. The moment he steps outside the arena, he vanishes. And that silence, that absence, it frustrates people. Because in a world obsessed with branding, Brock Lesnar refuses to be understood. His resume is bulletproof. NCAA Heavyweight Champion, youngest WWE Champion ever, UFC Heavyweight Champion, only man to headline WrestleMania and a UFC PPV in the same year, only man to end Undertaker's WrestleMania streak. He accomplished more across 3 different worlds than most legends do in one. And yet, you rarely hear his name in GOAT conversations. Why? Because Lesnar never played the politics. He never kissed the ring. He didn't chase fan love or media praise or locker room respect. He showed up. He dominated. He cashed his check. And he left. Legacy? That's for people who need it. Brock Lesnar doesn't. Even his peers can't figure him out. Stone Cold called him the most legit guy we've ever had. Daniel Cormier called him a monster with scary strength. Kurt Angle? Best athlete I've ever seen in a ring. But Lesnar doesn't react to praise. He doesn't correct haters. He doesn't shape narratives. Because the truth is, he doesn't care what you think. He never wanted to be liked. He just wanted to win. And once he did, he disappeared. Not because he couldn't stay, but because he never wanted to. Today, Brock Lesnar lives in the woods. Literally. Not in LA, not in Vegas, not even Minnesota, but in a remote compound in rural Saskatchewan, Canada, where the snow buries the ground for half the year and silence is the only sound. He lives with his wife, former WWE star Sable, and their children. No paparazzi, no neighbors, just land, cattle, and cold. And that's exactly how he wants it. Lesnar runs his own farm, hunts his own food, repairs his own fences. There are no trainers, no entourages, no fans waiting outside the gate, just him. He occasionally returns to WWE, suplexes a few people, cashes a check, disappears again. But each time, he looks a little more distant, a little more removed, like someone playing a role they've already outgrown. He doesn't need the money. He doesn't want the fame. He just exists. And that's the strange, haunting beauty of Brock Lesnar's story. He was a once-in-a-generation athlete, a true hybrid of size, speed, and savagery. He did things no man had done before, and still, he never needed it. Most fighters cling to legacy. Most wrestlers chase one last pop. Brock Lesnar? He ran the other way. He could have been a billionaire brand, a training guru, a media figure, a goat in the eyes of history. But instead, he chose the woods. Because for Brock Lesnar, greatness was never the goal. Solitude was. He didn't fight to be famous. He didn't dominate to be remembered. He did it so he could disappear without apology. And that's what made him the beast no one ever truly understood.